Here we go. Hello, folks. And you'll notice immediately I'm wearing a different shirt, and you'll understand why because of the nature of the show. It's World War II TV, and we're doing one of our movie specials. And I have three of hopefully four guests joining us, and we're going to hear about from them very shortly. We're talking, of course, about the 2018 movie Go Broke, and I have three guests, I say so far. So Stacey, Chris, and Jake are joining us from all over the world, and we've already had a discussion about time zones and times, and it's complicated. But hey, we're all here together now. So, hi, folks. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having us, Paul.
Great to be here.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with some questions. I've got my little questions worked out here, and obviously people who are watching this, they are familiar with the movie, even if they haven't actually seen it yet, and we'll come up to later on talking about the distribution and what you'd like to see for the movie. But I think most people watching will know Stacey's involvement because you wrote it, you're the executive producer, it's basically your baby, and we will have you talk. But I want to speak to Chris and Jake first about how did you first hear about the project, and more importantly, why did you get involved? I mean, basically, as I understand it, if Stacey asks you, you have to say yes, or you get, that. But basically, I want to hear it from you. Why you got involved? Let's go with Chris first.
Yeah, wow, it was years ago. She and I kind of partnered up she was going to work on our film, we were going to work on her film. Back in, I don't know if it was like 2005, maybe 2006.
2004.
2004, see, yeah. So long ago. Anyway, I was going to do a short film about the 100th 442nd. We were planning this many years ago. I'm not sure how we connected with Stacey. Did you contact us? I don't remember.
Yeah, Rania Mata, a friend of Rania Mata's was like, hey, you should talk to Chris Toshima. He has an Oscar.
we went to Hawaii to check out some locations and meet some people, and she showed us around, and we talked and talked and talked, and she had this grand plan idea to do this feature about this history. And, I'm a little more realistic and go, yeah, okay, well, help us make our film, because I don't know, I was thinking to myself, I don't know if yours is ever going to happen, but, in the meantime, help us. So somehow our end fell apart, and she kept going, and she actually made her film and I didn't. So many, many years later, she calls me and says, offers me this part. And Shigeo Yoshida, I'm like, who is that? I don't know. So I kind of look him up and start reading the script, and he's an amazing man. And like everything in this movie, just history untold that, nobody knows. People are more familiar with the exploits on the battlefield of the 442nd 100th Infantry Battalion, but how did they come to be? What was going on the ground in Hawaii at the time? So learning all that was just amazing, reading the script. I'm an actor, so any part you want to do, but to have a part like this in this kind of history that I've been studying for many, many years and yet was just learning about, knowing the importance of these kinds of histories. I think, Paul, we were just talking about, the histories that we are kind of fed and what we don't know, all the World War II history that is untold. So, as a Japanese American, to learn about all of this history, that some of it I knew, but most of it I didn't. To be a part of that was, was an honor. So I just jumped at that chance, and I feel just really lucky to kind of been at the right place at the right time, to have been put in this movie by Stacey. Because in the end, I kind of didn't do too much. Like I said, our end fell apart, and she went ahead, full steam ahead, got the entire state involved, and a worldwide network involved, and made this amazing million dollar movie happen on a minuscule fraction of that, because everyone knew how important it was and wanted to chip in and wanted to help any way they could. I'm sure she'll talk more about that. So it was an honor for me just to be asked.
Well, that's a great answer. I think we can all tell when watching it that you've managed to stretch and make every single dollar go 100 times, because it's it's an important story. So Jake, you you're mostly involved in the music, but you appear as well. How did you get involved, and what was your reason for getting involved?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Chris said. I mean, like being a part of this project, you know, was really more of a, it was almost like our duty, especially as a, you know, as a Japanese American living here in this country, to support this story so that people all over the world could realize this and learn, you know, the origins of these incredible soldiers. So yeah, so I mean, everything Chris said, and also, you know, I've known Stacey since high school, and this, you know, telling this story and just gathering the information, you know, from the veterans and her friendship, her relationship with them. You know, she had this passion for this for, I mean, gosh, over 2 decades, I feel like already. And, you know, so just to see that drive, right? Like Chris was saying, you know, even after their project kind of, kind of, they stopped production, you know, Stacey just, you know, she kept pushing, and I've seen her hit many obstacles where, you know, 99.9% of the people would just be like, oh well, I guess we can't do it. You know, I've seen her hit multiple obstacles where it just seemed impossible, but she just did not let up. And I'm just so inspired by her resilience and just her drive. But I think it's also a reflection of that generation, you know, that she's telling the story about. So yeah.
I mean, well, the great answers. Like, you know, I think you said it there, Chris, about the fact that a lot of historians, I think, and the wider public know a bit more about the 442nd in combat. I mean, I've on my own shows, I had Billy Tucci on a comic book creator. He put a Sergeant Rock comic together it got involved in the Hurtgen Forest with the 442nd, and there's been other movies. But in some ways, that's the easier story to tell because it's in battle. It's after all the complicated 2 or 3 years that precede that. And your movie, Stacey, is the complicated period. It's the bit where no one's certain which way it's going to swing. It goes through the patriotism and then internment and then the various stages that go through to the creation of the unit. And so, you know, I think yours is the more challenging film, and therefore the most difficult one to achieve. And I will want to bring in Peter when he joins us as well later. But my only frame of reference for this, and this is a question I was going to ask later, but I'm going to ask it now, is I know a lot of the Band of Brothers guys because of just various involvement over the years, and I know those guys are incredibly honored to be involved with something because of the deep connection they had with the veterans, and all of them, no matter where their careers take them, will say that that time, that year and a half they spent committed to that HBO series and getting to know the veterans will always be about the most important thing they ever did. Maybe not the most famous, maybe not the most rewarding, but the most important. Chris and Jake, with all your careers, you know, you've got Oscar winner on one hand, a multi-million selling, you know, musician. I get the impression already just into this conversation that you're very proud of your involvement with Go for Broke, and that no matter where your careers go, you'll be very proud, very pleased you got involved with this particular project. And Stacey, how gratifying it is for you that these people will jump on a call like this and talk to some English guy in France who's not very big, just because you asked them. You obviously were able to bring these people in. I mean, share a little bit with our audience about the journey of wanting to do this movie to be all the way to making a movie, perhaps the potted version, otherwise we'll be here all night, because obviously we work on it, as they said, for 2 decades, but kind of the potted version.
So, you know, you're talking about the Band of Brothers cast, you know, and I didn't realize until we won that award, you know, the Outstanding Feature Film for the World War II Normandy Film Festival, which you were on the jury, right? You selected our film. And so I went to the panel and they were talking about stuff, and I realized, oh my God, these guys with their multi-million-dollar budget, you know, even they did not get to film on location where actual events happened. And we did, you know, we didn't have any money, you know, and it was just so, that really was special to me, you know. And like Schofield Barracks, nobody gets to film at Schofield Barracks. It's an army base, you know, and we shot there for a week, and we shot where the actual Varsity Victory Volunteers busted rocks and did labor and lived. And, you know, Iolani Palace, King Street is the busiest thoroughfare in Hawaii. It goes right down downtown Honolulu, and then it goes in front of the Iolani Palace, which is the only palace in the United States. And Mayor Caldwell closed it down for us, you know, our little, you know, because it's so important to Hawaii's history, and, you know, especially that it all started here. You know, there would be no 442 without the original 100th Battalion and the Varsity Victory Volunteers and all the people in the film, you know, like Shigeo Yoshida and Hung Wai Ching and Governor De Los Emmons, who was a military governor, and Robert Shivers, who was the head of the FBI, you know. So all these people who supported the Japanese and the Japanese community behind the scenes, you know, they all made it happen, you know. So people know about the 442, they know Go for Broke, but, you know, all of that would not have happened if not for Hawaii. So I think that was important to share. Yeah.
I mean, and you said yourself about how you got the backing of the state and all these resources, but I'm interested, did they have different aspirations for what you did with the movie? Because, you know, and I'm saying this as a white guy who's never been to Hawaii, but there's lots of different backgrounds there who look at those events probably from different points of view. Because, you know, I'm in Normandy, where there's a Normandy resistance monument being created right now, and it's raising all the issues of the fact there's a communist resistance and there's the Gaullist resistance, and some will want it portrayed some way, someone will want it portrayed the other way. So when you're pitching this film to them, did they come to you with kind of different visions of it? Did some want you to highlight one aspect more than others? How did you kind of tell them what your vision was?
Well, I got Eddie Yamasaki, who was a 442nd veteran, and I dragged him around the Capitol, you know, talking to these legislators. And I mean, I joke that I dragged him. I don't really drag him. I didn't. He went willingly, and he was actually probably the only 442 veteran who could have done it, because, you know, they're so humble. They don't want attention, but yet, of course, they know that what they did was important, you know. And so they're sort of like culturally Japanese. If you did something good, you don't talk about it, you know, or otherwise it's like you're bragging, you know. And so that's, you know, people have always been like, why hasn't there been a movie since 1950, you know, Go for Broke, Van Johnson, that Hollywood MGM thing. And that's why, really, you know, there's so much resistance to sharing stories, or like, you know, like saying, yeah, I did that, you know what I mean? And so it's only when these veterans got older that they realized, wow, when we die, nobody's going to remember what we did if we don't start talking, you know. And so Eddie Yamasaki, he was very charming. You know, he's actually the only 442 vet to go to Punahou and Harvard, like Obama, because of racism, you know. In his class, he only had 2 Japanese. There were 8 Chinese, and the rest were just haole, you know, white people and Hawaiians. So, you know, I mean, that kind of tells you what it was like, you know, the picture looked like in Hawaii. It was a very vertical society with the haoles on top and everybody else on the bottom. And you know, people say, oh, Japanese were second-class citizens. That's not even true. It's like they weren't even second class. Like second class was Hawaiian, you know, and it was like Hawaiian, Chinese, the order that you came in, and it's really like Japanese were kind of on the bottom. And it's yeah, when you look at it, they went off to war. And they came back, and they really built these war veterans built modern Hawaii, you know, as we know it. And it would not, like, everyone knows who Senator Daniel Inouye is, because he was our U.S. Senator for how many years, like over 50 years. He has a Medal of Honor for he earned it in Italy. He lost his right arm, and you know, he was amazing. And Sparky Matsunaga was also our U.S. Senator for many years. Dana Kaka, he's Hawaiian Chinese. He was also a World War II veteran. So, you know, I mean, these stories, like Hawaii's contribution is huge. You know, I mean, it started here for America, you know, and it's the only battleground in the US. And, you know, people I guess they don't realize that. But yeah, it was there's no division of what story nobody disputes that this story is super important to Hawaii.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, again, my point as a white guy living in Europe is that I knew the bullet points of the history there. You know, I knew Pearl Harbor, I knew internment, and I knew combat. But what I didn't really know was the linking and the stages. And it's I didn't have the full script, so to speak, pardon the pun. And I think what your movie does is you do weave in the stages between those elements. I think people like me and the wider world in Europe and North America need to understand that. We need to understand how complicated it was down there. We need to understand the racism, and yet you don't preach during the film. I think it would have been very easy to give all us white people a lesson of you were really cruel and you did all this wrong. But the problem is with doing that is you end up, people start fighting back and they start denial and things. So I think you had to balance it very carefully. We've got Peter coming in now, between, you know, in telling a story, getting across the fact there was a lot of complicated issues going on, but not preaching. How did you adjust to all that, Stacey? Did the script go through many rewrites? Did you want to make it more edgy, less edgy? Give us an idea of how that developed.
I mean, well, see, I guess it's the difference is also between Hawaii and the U.S. mainland, you know, because there was no like mass incarceration of, you know, Japanese and Japanese Americans in Hawaii. You know, like less than 1% of the population was rounded up by the FBI and, you know, and detained, as you saw in the film. And of course, that's sad, you know, like eventually 1,100 people would be rounded up and detained. But that's, you know, that's very different from, you know, taking an entire population from the West Coast, stripping them of all their belongings, you know, everything they'd worked for, and then putting them in jail, basically, you know, for 3 or 4 years, you know, so that the feeling in Hawaii is very different. So like if you go to the, you know, the West Coast in California, the story is really about internment. It's like, oh, which camp were you at? Or your family, where were you guys? And so that's not the case in Hawaii, you know, because the population was treated so differently, you know. And I think that, and so the tagline at the end, you know, it's Aloha can change the world. And that really is the message of the movie, because there was such, you know, different treatment of people. Of course, people in Hawaii were treated poorly as well. You know, like my great grandfather, he had a shrimp farm, and that was seized by the military. My grandpa's younger brother had a boat. The military seized that. They never got it back. And that, you know, my great uncle still served with the 100th Battalion. You know, he was in defending, you know, Hawaii on December 7th, 1941, with all the other races that were in the armed forces. So, you know, it's not. Yeah, I mean, I never intended it to be preachy, because it's not really how we feel. You know, like we don't feel like, oh, white man, you suck. You know, it's just, it was a really difficult time. And so, yeah, there was a lot of racism, and internment was horrible. You know, that was a really awful civil rights debacle, you know, and it's a wound that continues. You know, it really divided the Japanese community on the mainland. But in Hawaii, it's really more, they were always secure in their identity, because there were so many of them. You know, it was like almost half the population. So everyone here, we're very fortunate to grow up, you know, just secure, not wondering, you know, like, oh, I'm gonna get, you know, I'm a minority, because you're not a minority. You're actually the majority in a lot of cases. So that's the reason. I mean, it is a very different perspective. And I think, I mean, and so it was nice to bring it to the mainland too, because the mainland Japanese Americans, you know, some kind of resent the Hawaii people, because they're like, well, you didn't get interned, you don't know, you know? And it's like, well, it's not their fault either, but, you know, it doesn't help to, you know, to divide people or be like, well, you didn't suffer, so you can't understand, you know, and, but yeah.
Yeah, measuring how much racism you've endured compared to someone else on like some kind of scale where I win, I've got more than you, is never a positive way. But we should welcome Peter to the show. Thanks for joining us, Peter. And I want to bring back the question that we asked Chris and Jake, and so we'll backpedal a bit. And Peter,
sure.
How did you get approached by Stacey, and what was your main reason for getting involved in Go for Broke?
Always loved the story. Always wanted to participate in anything that anybody would mount. regarding that story, whether it was a Hawaiian experience or a California experience. Regarding Stacey, I think I was sitting on a Hawaiian Airlines flight finishing a Hawaii 5-0, scrolling through social media, and I see this girl, Stacey Hayashi, on my feed popping up all over the place, talking about 442 stuff, internment stuff, and saw that we had mutual friends. And I don't know, there was a conversation about this. I just hopped in on this, and then boom, lightning in a bottle. We shared a lot of similar, interests, and certainly this obsession with the 442. And she had so much to offer, because I really knew nothing about the Hawaiian experience and knew a lot about the Canadian and the West Coast American experience during that time. So was immediately drawn to her. She had this project on the table. She pretty much said, okay, I'm looking for Japanese heritage actors. Would you like to be in this? It would be great if you were in this. And then it went from there. Maybe within a year and a half, she was put before camera, and timing worked out, and I got a flight out of her, made it to Hawaii, and shot. It was great. I had known Chris for a long time before that, and always admired him, and his accomplishments. So I jumped on that opportunity. And of course, Jake, everybody involved was impressive to me. It didn't have the certainly Hollywood studio, backing and maybe production value, but I think for the budget and everything, it was good to go ahead, green light, and I think it turned out really well, and I'm proud of it, proud of her.
Well, again, for those watching who haven't seen it, if you could pick the best of Japanese North American talent, you wouldn't get any better than some of the people you got involved. It's a who's who, you must have used up a lot of favors, Stacey. How many years ahead do you owe people house cleaning? It's you got an incredible talent.
I do. I'm very lucky. Yeah. But like Chris and Jake said, I'm with them. I've known them for a long time, and Jake since high school. Right. And so I don't even remember, we bumped into each other, I don't know, Kukilao or something, right? And then I was like, hey, I'm working on this movie about the 442. You want to write the soundtrack? And he was like, yeah, okay. Right. So
yeah, it was, I think, for me, and I've shared this with Stacey, and I've shared this publicly, but growing up, the Nisei veterans were my heroes, right? Growing up, because, as a kid, you realize that, wow, because of the sacrifices that they made, we have a much better life living in this country, right? As an Asian American. And so when Stacey asked me that, I must have wrote that song like 10 years ago or something, or
yeah, you
more,
did.
when she
11 years ago.
11 years ago. Yeah. When she first approached me, I was like, oh my gosh, I'd be honored, to write a theme song. I'll write whatever you want me to write. And then especially, she has an incredible relationship with the veterans. And I think she was a key factor in all of this, because like she mentioned earlier, they weren't ones to boast or talk about, what their accomplishments were. But there was something about with Stacey, they would open up to her and share, because they knew how fascinated she was by their story. And Stacey has a photographic memory. She remembers dates and everything. It's incredible how she organizes everything in her brain. But so the thing that I think what's really amazing about the story, of course, having the star power of like Chris and Peter and everyone involved, but it was but also the stories that are being told and shared, and the visuals and all of that are directly from the veterans. These things are directly from the veterans. The veterans wrote this movie. Stacey is just taking their words and their stories and putting it, on screen for everyone to see, and just kind of putting it together. so I mean, to me, that in itself is rare. It's a rarity, to see that. I'm just really proud, to be a part of this project. And yeah, so.
I mean, that's a very good point about the fact that you can put into words or onto film what the veterans say. Because, I've met 2,000 World War II veterans, and they're mostly not very good at telling their own stories. They're good at telling other people's bravery. Him over there, he did that. But when it comes to themselves, oh, no, I wasn't doing very much. But for you as actors to then be able to show someone else's bravery and you take it on board and say, well, as in character, you did this. It's good that the world gets to hear about bravery, and it's good that we get to hear what these guys did, because they're paving the way. And it's interesting, Peter, because you're Canadian, because on Sunday I've got Tim Cook on the show, and Tim Cook wrote the great book Fighting for History about Canada's understanding its past, and I just finished it last week, and it's a brilliant book that goes to all the Japanese Canadians, the Inuit issues, the problems with the veterans memorials, the museums, and these stages of how Canada's looked at its past and looked at the things it did well, things it did badly. I've got Ellen Besner on Friday, who wrote a book called Double Threat about Canadian Jews in World War II, and I think we absolutely need to be reminded that World War II wasn't just got won by white guys. I mean, it's something I bang on about on World War II TV all the time. World War II was men, women. It was men of all colors, all nations, all colors and creeds, and all coming together. And Hollywood is still very kind of, here's another action hero who's a guy from Chicago. And it's very gratifying to see a movie where there's no white faces in it. And yet, well, there's a couple here and there.
Exactly.
They're all just... Yeah, they're all just people telling stories. We won this war. I say we, I wasn't involved at all, but World War II was achieved by everybody coming together. So what your movie does is highlight that. But tell me, Stacey and the rest of you, because I get the impression, Stacey, when you're bringing talent like this together, you're going to take in their input as well. I mean, Chris, has the experience with his movie about the World War II from 1940. You've got all these talent there. You're not going to let these people come in and then not take on their advice. Yeah. So how did you balance just generally telling history and telling a good story? Because we've been talking about highlighting the events of veterans and what they achieved, but that's no good if the narrative is boring. If you're not actually telling an entertaining story, you can be as righteous as you like about telling people about history, but it's got to be entertaining. So how did you get that balance where you actually weave together a narrative that is, when you're watching it, you want to find out what happens next?
Yeah. So that's a good question. And actually it really helped that I knew, Chris and Jake for many years, and I always wanted to put Jake in the film, and he actually didn't really want to do it.
Jake was so good.
He tried to get out of it.
Wait. No, I always wanted to do the music because that's what I feel.
Yeah,
I didn't want to be in
not the acting.
Because
was it about the haircut, Jake? Was it just about the haircut, or did you not want to be in it?
I have no acting. I am not an actor. I mean, you have Chris, Peter. I'm like, I have no business being in front of the camera.
No,
Jake,
whatever.
So good, man.
I'm gonna love them. So yeah. See, so like for something like
Thanks,
that,
Peter,
like Jake goes and he visits schools and he plays ukulele for them to inspire the kids. And so when I was casting, and I was thinking, who should Jake play? I was like, oh my God, he should play Saburo Maehara, who was a teacher. And so I wrote the things that Jake actually really says to kids anyway. He might not talk about the golden rule, which is what they did teach in Japanese schools. I thought that was important to mention because so FBI, head of the FBI, Robert Shivers, he actually asked his live-in, she helped with housework and stuff here, Sue Kobatake, she became Sue Isonaga, and she was a student at UH, but, he asked her, he was like, so what do you guys learn, in Japanese school? Do you learn are you allegiance to the emperor? And she was like, no, we learn like the golden rule and stuff like that. So that's why I put that in, Jake's scene. But, like even Chris too, like knowing Chris and how he is, he's very serious and articulate and eloquent. And that's what Shigeo Yoshida was. He wrote all the speeches for the military governor, and it was just kind of funny. And then here he is being played off by Hung Wai-ching, who is really kind of a wild guy. I mean, he spoke pidgin and he was very flamboyant, and so it was actually fun to write their scenes and the back and forth between Chris and Mike Ng, who played Hung Wai-ching. And so lastly for Peter, I've known Peter the shortest, because when did we meet? Like 2014 or something. Yeah, so he was, and then I didn't meet him in person until the following year, because he lived in LA, and then I invited him to like this MIS New Year party, so it was a Shinenkai, and he was just like sort of nervous, and he was like smoking and had to go outside and get a drink, and I'm like, dude, are you okay? And then it hit me. I was like, this is the most Japanese people you've ever been with in a room before, right? And he was like, yeah, there's a lot of political power in here,
Heroes, man. Heroes. You guys had medals all over them. I'm like, I gotta go far away from here. These are real heroes, That's what being nervous. Plus, the first time I ever heard of the 442 was watching The Karate Kid. Didn't know what it was.
Okay. Yeah.
What Ralph Macchio gets, and I was so confused. How could he be from Okinawa and he has an American?
No, I didn't like that. Okay, I was 10 years old or something, and I really didn't like that because there were no Issei, there were no immigrants in the 442. They were all Americans.
That's what I was confused about. So I ran into the hall to ask my dad, what's the 442? What's going on? He explained it all to me. And that's when I realized the power of movies.
Yeah. Oh.
It was huge right there. I went, what? They're teaching something, for the better or for worse. I don't know, but they're teaching something. And I'm learning this, and something so, that was so epic in my heritage that my dad lived through and was directly affected by. I learned it, and it was being, it was through these writers, white writers in Hollywood. So I learned, I did, but I realized right there.
Pam Marita's idea.
I'm sorry?
It was Pam Marita's idea to have Mr. Miyagi be part of the 442. So John Avildsen.
I did not know that.
Okay. Yeah.
See what happens when you diversify behind the camera? That makes it out. So it's exactly, that was a huge turning point for me. I was like, wow, okay, Hollywood, I get it. This is a megaphone. This is shaping the world. This could change the hearts and minds of half a country if you put out the wrong kind of media. I knew how powerful it was. I got to get there. I got to get there, man, because that was it. It was right there, that moment. I went,
yeah.
That brings up an interesting point, Peter, because you all said, Jake, Chris, Peter, and Stacey, obviously, you all grew up aware of the 442, but I'm interested in that what you thought you knew then, did you find out that actually you'd learned some kind of myth? Because I'm speaking as an English guy. We grew up with the myth of the Battle of Britain, for example, that it was the Knights of the Sky defeating the Germans and we were the underdogs. In reality, we weren't the underdogs. The Luftwaffe were the underdogs, and we realised that some of our own legends aren't actually really true. The events are true, but you've learned to kind of collective memory. And I'm interested, from your point of view, is there a kind of a collective memory of the 442 that isn't really right, and you have to kind of go beyond that to the real truth? And is that a problem? Is there an issue with people thinking they know the history, and then you tell them actually, well, you've kind of not quite got it right?
I think there's just that major misconception when they say 800 casualties, rescuing the lost battalion. That is not true. They actually experienced 800 casualties for the entire month of October and heading into November. So that included a lot of time. And it was a rescue, the liberation of Bruyères and Bifontaine, so these two French towns, and then also the rescue of the Lost Battalion of Texas, who were surrounded by Nazis in the Vosges Mountains of France. So, I mean, that's really and so people don't understand casualties. They think, oh, wow, 800 guys died, saving 200. And that's not true. So that's really the biggest sort of myth, I think, or misinformation that is like, we got to correct that, but that's numbers. It's not.
Yeah.
It's
but it is important. I mean, the word casualty does get confused very easily, and we get it here in normally with Omaha Beach and what have you. And but so you've got this. We're moving through the interview now. The movie is available for those who are watching. There's a link below to how you can get to Stacey's website, Go for Broke, and you can download it on Vimeo and watch it. But what would have been your dream? I mean, you'd love to have seen it in theaters around the world and get a huge release. But is there anything likely to happen on that front? Is it going to be a part 2? Is it going to be because the origin story does imply like the beginning of a trilogy, doesn't it? It's kind of got that, that we're going to, what would be the dream to take this forward?
So actually that is, you're right. It is the dream to do like a limited series like Band of Brothers. And I didn't really, that was actually Jake's, comment. We were having dinner in LA, actually. It was like the night of the Grammys. And I remember this very clearly. I was complaining. I was like, there's so much to tell. It is impossible to tell this story. This movie is going to be like 5 hours long. And he was like, it should just be like a mini series like Band of Brothers. And I was like, you're right. Because there's so much that doesn't fit into this 100 440-second thing, because the 100, they have their own story, before the 442 even showed up, in Italy. And then there's like training and how the mainland guys and the Hawaii guys didn't get along and how they resolved that, and then there's like the home front and then there's also the guys in the Pacific in the China, India, Burma theater, with the OSS, because that's amazing, so they were everywhere. And it's not just the 100 440-second, as most people know, but the military intelligence service, General Willoughby, he was second in command to General MacArthur. And he credits the MIS with shortening the war in the Pacific by 2 years and saving over 1 million lives. And that's, it sounds like a huge number, but when you think about the Battle of Okinawa and how 250,000 people died, it's really not an exaggeration. So yeah, we do want to, the thing that everybody wants to see is the Battle of the Vosges, which is one of the top 10 battles in U.S. military history, including the Civil War. And so we're actually that's actually in the works. We're gonna finally make DVDs of Go for Broke, and that'll be part of the financing plan to make this, we're gonna skip a bunch of episodes because, that's the one that everybody wants to see. So we have friends, in Bruyere and Bifontaine, and the original foxholes are still there. They're very celebrated there. There's 442 Highway, and there's the Peace and Freedom Trail, and there's all these monuments for them. And as I said, the original foxholes and the people, the buildings really look the same. So it sounds like a very expensive thing to do, and it is. Filmmaking is expensive, but once we can, as long as we can pay our cast and crew, those salaries, there isn't too much. Like the other things that are really expensive are your vehicles, your uniforms, and whatever. And see, that's already there. It's in France. So, it's doable.
Well, that would be fantastic to see something on the Vosges Mountains. Would just from a war film and historian's point of view. Anything that puts a spotlight on the Vosges Mountains or the Hurtgen, because we've had it on numerous shows. I know you don't watch all my World War II TV shows, but the problem is your mainstream public, they can only kind of take one thing at a time. So 1944, it goes Normandy, Market Garden, Ardennes. They haven't got room to fit in the Hurtgen Forest and the Vosges Mountains there. They can only kind of take, they think World War II is one event leading to second event, third event. And that's the problem with in doing that, we miss the stuff on the side, and the stuff on the side is often just as important, if not more important. It's just, my Normandy bookshelf is 3 bookshelves. My Vosges Mountain bookshelf is like 4 books or something, and that is just how it is. The problem is we keep retelling the same stories because it's easier. Both movies and writing, we're all guilty of it. Of just, how many more times are we going to reboot Batman? And I say that as someone who quite likes Batman, but it's like, I've seen it now. So Chris, we haven't spoken to Chris and Peter now. You and Jake as well. You've been in some pretty immense Hollywood productions. I mean, Peter, Midway and what have you. And what should be happening within the movie industry in terms of telling history? What would you like to? I'll ask Peter first. What do you think should be happening?
I think it's happening right now. It's just not happening fast enough. Just diversification behind the camera, really, to really shepherd the stories, original stories, not to rehash the same junk again. I can't really. I don't want to watch. Honestly, I don't want to watch a Matt Damon and George Clooney World War II movie again. I just don't. I just don't have it in me. I'll regurgitate. I want to see new stories. Love Batman like yourself. I am actually really looking forward to this new Robert Pattinson one. Okay, honestly.
Okay.
But to answer your question, it's diversification behind the camera, from directing to writing. You just gotta somehow have these people to develop these stories and put them out in the world. And Stacey's doing that. You know, she's all of it in a nutshell. And I was trying to mention earlier that Stacey is going to. I'm gonna say it, man. Stacey, you want to direct this, right? And I'm right, full behind you.
Yeah.
She wants to jump right to the action, and she gave me a spec sample of her vision for this next installment, and I finished it, put it down, called her right away, and said, and I'll quote myself, sounds sexist. This doesn't sound like a chick wrote this. That's what I wrote, and she went, ha ha ha. I can write action. And I said, you sure can. I'm like, this is over the top. This is almost too much action. It's almost like, I don't know who this came from, but this is crazy. I want in, right? And she goes, I can write action and I plan to direct, So I'm all for that. And that's exactly the kind of, the changes that are needed. That's really it. If we can't get Patty Jenkins from Wonder Woman, let's get Stacey Hayashi in there. I think Marvel is doing it a lot. They're placing new directors, new fledgling directors that are diverse and have a lot of accomplishments. Nowadays they're taking chances and they're clearly paying off. Stacey directing this new one, I think that's the right move. I'm fully behind it, and I'm just every day I learn from her because I have these limitations that I put on, prejudices that I have on people, and that was a clear example when I read it and I called it. I can't believe a girl wrote. What kind of asshole thing is that to say? I'll call myself out. I have to, and that was it because I didn't believe in my mind that she could. So why would I believe that she couldn't direct it too? She's accomplishing. She's overcoming hurdles right in front of my eyes, one by one. So the pattern's there. She can do it. She can do it, and she can do it better than most people that I would expect to be able to do it. So let them through. Get these people in there and let them do their jobs. They've been waiting, and festering, lifelong dreams. Definitely. So believe me, they are ready, and she's been ready. And there's so many people out there also.
Well, you've got a huge fan club, Stacey. It has to be said. Everyone thinks you're great. So Chris, what would you like to see? The same question to you. You said earlier you grew up reading about this period of history. You've been involved in a couple of productions that cover World War II. What would you like to see happen apart from Stacey's projects, but generally within the industry in terms of portraying history?
Oh, I think what Peter said is exactly true. It's just diversification, which is happening slowly now. We've been fighting this for decades, and there has always been a hesitancy because there's a feared risk if you don't have a white male lead in your project, and that was just the mode of the industry for decades. And within the last, I'd say 5 years, although it's a little bit longer, people are realizing that that's not true, and in fact, if you show people, themselves on screen, they'll pay to see it. And that's what people want. And that's why, television is much more diverse in getting that way every day. And movies are slowly coming around. But it's just allowing people to tell their own stories, which hasn't been allowed for pretty much the entire movie industry. So that's what needs to happen, and it is happening. It's not an easy thing to make a film like this or to tell this kind of history. It needs to be written, and it needs to be written well, and it needs to be produced well. And those are daunting tasks, but it's giving people a break who maybe don't have the resume because they've never been given that chance. And it does take a certain amount of risk in some people's eyes. I don't feel it's that way at all, because this idea that the famous person will make your movie a success is totally a myth. There's people who bomb in those movies all the time, and there's people unknowns who make great movies all the time. But when you're talking about risking 10, 20 million dollars, I can understand, you know, why people might be afraid. But I'm happy to say that, you know, that is slowly changing, that people are realizing that, well, that isn't a guarantee. That isn't necessarily what people want to see. And it's become proven that if you make a more diverse project, you know, people will come to see it. So those are the things that, you know, that I want to see. I mean, there's a lot of little things that I like to see. There's a lot more that I've already seen that I never thought I would see, you know, including just having an Asian American male romantic lead was, you know, always a dream, but I could never imagine it happening actually. And it's a common thing now. It's not unheard of. It's happening, you know, it took one success and several more to follow that up. We've had successes in the past, but there was nothing to kind of follow that up. You know, you can look at Jason Scott Lee, you know, 25 years ago, and he broke through, but there was nothing for him to follow through with, because people didn't know what to do with him at that time. Yeah. There was no, you know, there were no scripts floating around that he could star in. Now there's, you know, someone breaks through, or Crazy Rich Asians breaks through, and people go, well, where's that Asian script you had? And there are tons of them to look at, and they're good. And there are people to direct those, and they're good. And you know, it's like, giving us a chance and we'll show you what we can do. And that's always been true. And now we have, you know, we have showcases, and we have, you know, proven cases of this happening this year, where there's already a lot of buzz about, you know, 2 Asian directors that could receive a lot of notoriety. It's award season right now. And, you know, even Nomadland, and you have Minari. And these films that are, you know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, they never would have been made. If they would have been made, they never would have been seen. And just so much has changed now with, you know, what's streaming and what's accessible to people, and what, you know, the social media allows people to have voices and saying, yes, I want to see this. No, we don't want to see that. So the industry started getting turned on its head, and it's actually a really exciting time, because the limits are much less. It's no longer like we're pushing this boulder uphill. It's like we're still pushing a boulder, but it's somewhat of a level ground now. We just keep pushing and open those doors, and people are getting chances, and people are showing that, you know, diversity is not just a catchphrase. It's, you know, reality. And that's what, you know, people appreciate and want to see. So that's what I'm just wanting to see more of it, you know.
Which, bringing it back to the subject of the show, is that boulder began to be pushed uphill by the 442, wasn't it? Or one of the boulders, that, you know, that what they did to break down the barriers and prove alongside. I mean, they had to do it the hard way, and what they did was slightly harder than getting films. Well, we have Korean, you know, X-Wing pilots in The Mandalorian now, don't we? I mean, it's amazing what we've come. But bringing it back to World War II movies and things, I think one of the things I'm very interested in, which is what I do on my channel here, I'm only a small voice, is collaboration, because you have historians writing histories about World War II, you have museums doing things about World War II, you have tourism bringing people to World War II, and you have filmmakers. And I think to get things like a Vosges, you need all of those things working together. If you could get a movie made that a museum said, okay, if this movie is good, we'll put it in our museum theaters, showing it 5 times a day. So, because if the history is good, we'll teach it there. Then you get a budget from the tourist region who are going to bring it in there because it brings tourists in there. Then the historians say, well, hang on, this is a good subject. Can I submit my research for all the after action reports about this particular unit? Can I have a voice in it? And suddenly you've got a big team of people behind you rather than just one thing. And that's where, even in 20 years since Band of Brothers, things like this Zoom conversation we're having now, where we're talking to each other across how many different time zones, is amazing. And that opportunity to get stories told, I think, and bringing talent together can only get better. And I mean, I'm just a small fish on YouTube, but, you know, historians are watching these shows, and I think if people who've got ideas could find a means of getting in touch with people who can make those ideas real, it's better for everybody. But going back to film, because I think we've gone down a couple of rabbit holes there. My fault. It's my host. I should have done it. But going back to film there, the music is fantastic. Jake, it's just extraordinary. You know, I find on my third viewing of it, I find myself just listening to the music and forget, oh, hang on, I've been not following the dialogue anymore. I've been listening to the music. So that was just amazing.
Well, thank you, Paul. Thank
you made that, but tell us about how you managed to just stretch that budget, Stacey, because the special effects of the Pearl Harbor sequence were incredibly well done. I mean, I think one of my favorite scenes is the Japanese aircraft that does the bank, and you see the pilot looking down. That was really well done. I mean, you put some effort into that. How did you achieve polish for not very many pennies?
That was all ingenuity, and we had some really smart people working on it. So Dean Sensui, he was one of my producers, but Dean is really good at building stuff, and he did a lot of the effects. I mean, he worked with a team that I don't even know, I think they're in India, but it was like a lot of rendering and I don't even know, rotoscoping, but yeah. But he was like, that was actually his idea, the banking, he was like, what if, because we all know that Danny Noy was riding his bike to, shaking his fist at the sky, seeing the planes. But that visual was Dean's idea. And he was like, I could build the cockpit. And that's actually how we did it. So he built the cockpit, he climbed on, so we have a Zero at the Pacific Aviation Museum here at Pearl Harbor. And so he actually got to climb on the Zero, and he looked at everything, and he built the cockpit for Cody. And Cody is actually a volunteer at the Pearl Harbor Museum, the Aviation Museum. And so that uniform that he's wearing, he wears that at the museum. So this collaboration, between the museums and, filmmakers and everyone, I mean, that is what we got with Go for Broke. And it was really great, to have the support of everyone, because even Iolani Palace, that's a museum now too, and we actually filmed at the Naval Air Museum at Barbers Point. It wasn't an airport in the thing, but we were able to use some of their things, and everyone helped us. It was just amazing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just throwing the conversation on YouTube there, and again, it's criminal that people don't know how to access the movie. They don't. I mean, for those watching, it's in the description below. The website is there. Just scroll down, you'll see it there. But what, in my limited way, and those are watchers, what can we do to help push Go for Broke? What can we do to get the story out there? What? I mean, obviously we share links. Even just having this show and talking about it is a little part of it. But what can people do if there are people watching this who run museums or have film festivals? What's our advice? What can we do to help?
Sorry, Stacey and Paul. Sorry, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but Stacey, I'm so sorry, but I have to log off right now. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Paul,
thank you very much, Jake, and your music was extraordinary. Any final word before you want to say about about working on it, or what it's meant to you meeting the veterans, or anything?
Oh, yeah, it was just just a big mahalo. Thank you to Stacey, for including me on this project, because I'm just so proud to be a part of it. So proud to help and support it, and to help this story to get out to the world. And Chris and Peter, it was such an honor meeting you and working with you guys and being a part of this with all of you. And Stacey, I know you're going to direct one heck of a follow-up, so it's going to be awesome.
Jake help me produce it. And so is Peter.
Hey, Jake, your music really was astonishing. It's such an inventive, original score. To hear something original these days, it's rare, but something that's so beautiful and moving, that works with the tones and the culture, and so much of it is just wrapped up in this amazing score. So I want to thank you for contributing to this film, because the music is such a key part of a film success, and we have you to thank for so much of it. So
it's
thank
true.
you.
Subliminally,
thank you, Chris. Thank you.
It's an awesome huge soundtrack. Yeah,
it's actually
we need a soundtrack. I keep telling Jake we need a soundtrack.
Thanks.
Yeah, CD. Downloads, yeah, get it out there. Well, thanks for joining us, Jake. If you've got to run, then it's been a pleasure having you on here. It's we're humbled by your presence today. Thank you very much, Jake.
Thank you. All right, take care,
Aloha,
everyone.
Jake.
Aloha. Stacey, I'll talk to you later. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Okay, so Stacey, let's bring it back to filming, and we'll bring things in there because you've all got things to do. And I mean, I've enjoyed talking to you, but that cinematography, the you said, I mean, you filmed at the schools, you filmed at the barracks, you filmed at the beat. Everything seemed really authentic. So you didn't have to build the sets because you used the real places. And as you said, Band of Brothers, that whole Ardennes scene was a soundstage. I mean, that's, I walked across the real Ardennes. I remember it was with Rick Warden, who played Harry Welsh, and he said they did such a phenomenal job in a studio. But how much did that cost? How much of the budget was eaten up by building and importing all those trees from Belgium that they put into that soundstage in Hatfield? If you can go and film in the Vosges Mountains, in the real forests, in between the real trees with the real foxes, I mean, you're getting a great location that's authentic. And I'm a great believer as a battlefield tour guide by trade, is that there's no substitute for being in the real location.
Agree.
You can read 1,000 books about World War II or Normandy, but stand someone at Omaha Beach at low tide and show them that's what the American GIs faced running up that beach. That is worth reading 20 books. And the same thing, when I'm watching your movie and you're seeing, the aircraft flying over those authentic locations, it's amazing. And, and we don't want to talk about Midway too much. I quite like Midway, but it was very Hollywood, wasn't it? It was very, it was lots of people having a lot of say in it and maybe not pulling in the same direction. I think what I take away from your films, Dave, is that everybody who signed up with it joined that flow. The flow was going the same direction to tell a story properly, to honor what those veterans did, and everybody was happy to sail that course down there to get that result. So as a fan of World War II film, as a fan of history, thank you very much, Stacey, for getting that project done, because it will stand the test of time. And it is, I think it's as good as Schindler's List in that regard. What Schindler's List does for Holocaust, I think your movie in its own way, with the music as well, I think it does. It tells a really powerful story, and I think it's criminal that it's not better known. But anyway, so we'll. Anything else you'd like to say about working on it? Any I mean, the frustrations of dealing with any funny stories, Stacey, from doing it? Any things that you did that you want to share with us about the making? Any who was a pain to work with? He's Jake. You can say Jake now. He's gone now. No, I'm joking. Give us a couple of stories from the production.
Gosh,
we stayed in a hotel all together. Me, Chris, and Stacey.
That was after. That wasn't during production.
Yeah, it was kind of after, but it was still.
It was.
Movie, and that was awesome.
Yeah, it was right before we showed. It was right before we showed the movie to the vets and the cast and crew, and it wasn't really done yet. When we did that. Yeah.
Well, in fact, that was actually going to be my last question, as it's come up now. What was it like on the occasion you showed to the vets, and were you lucky enough to show it to several vets at the same time, or did it end up being that there were several screenings, or was there one big one?
Yeah, it was one big one at Hawaii Theater, and we had the production just rent the theater, and we invited all the vets, and sadly only one vet that was in it. Two vets that were in it could be there that day. So there are 4 veterans in the film. Senator Daniel Akaka, he's one of the mourners at the funeral scene. Herb Yanamura, who saved the lives of 1,500 people in the Battle of Okinawa, he's at the end at the palace. And then there's Ted Tsukiyama and Bishop Fujitani, who were part of the VVV, they have actors playing them, portraying them in the film. So somehow Ted was sick, and Bishop Fujitani was sick too. And so only Akira Otani was there. Oh, and it's his birthday today, by the way. Yeah. And so but he was the only vet, and Senator Akaka were there. But I mean, there are several other veterans there. And it was just real that, who are also dear friends of mine. And if they were not in the movie, they knew the people in the movie, the vets in the movie, because those are also all our dear friends. And so that was really, to me, that was the most meaningful thing. I mean, it was sold out at the film festival a month later, and it was on several screens. And I just heard that the line wrapped, you know, two blocks down. You know, it was pretty crazy, you know, to see those crowds. But and it was nice. You know, that was nice. But it was really just showing it to the veterans, you know, that meant the most to me, because it's about them. You know, the whole reason, like, they're the reason I did this and endured all that crap over all these years.
And clearly they all thought it was good, because, you know, not a day goes past when you don't post a photo of you with a veteran or three and all these things you do. You put us all to shame with how much work you do. I was saying to Chris before we went online, you know, if you're not smiling on my Facebook feed, then there's something going wrong with the world. I mean, when you're not in a good place, I feel the world is in a worse place, because you are one of those beacons of joy and effort and passion that more of us should be like you. The world should have more Stacey's in it, frankly, is what I'm saying. But what was it like, just that reaction, and for you know, for Chris and Peter, when you've met veterans, that seeing how much they must have appreciated it, must have made it been the highlight, surely.
Oh, talk about the Admiral Harris and Masa Nakamura Legion of Honor thing, because that actually wasn't part of showing it, but it just happened to be in front of the. So yeah, you guys can talk about that.
Go ahead, Chris.
You know, it was really unspoken. It's not like I talked to them and they talked to me about it and isn't this great, and just seeing them there, knowing how long it's been before their story has been told. You know, the whole thing was there was so much going on, and the whole experience was just, you know, something to remember. And I was just trying to be in the moment the whole night. But yeah, there was it the Legion of Honor award?
Yeah,
what was it called?
French Legion of Honor.
French Legion of Honor. You know, it was given by Admiral Harry Harris, who just the irony of having you know, a Japanese American leading, you know, that whole quadrant of the world, representing the United States, when, you know, within the lifetime of this veteran, you know, they were the enemy and thought they couldn't be trusted for anything. That irony was not lost on me. It was such an amazing moment. I'm so glad Peter whipped out his camera, because the great picture that we use, Peter took. He and I were standing just right, like, you know, 8 feet from him, and watched this moment. So, like I said, it was just an honor to be involved, and honor to be asked, and to be present at so many kind of historical moments, and to be able to sort of walk in the footsteps of these characters and relive their moments. You know, for an actor, you live for these moments to be able to portray them on screen, and to have this sort of layer of urgency and importance and relevance to your own history and your own community, and that's just very rare. So there are so many great moments that I had making this film. Again, Stacey, thanks for asking.
Thanks.
Yeah, I feel the same way. There were so many things that I benefited from, you know, through this whole project. Stacey introduced us to many of these personalities that I hold as personal heroes, speechless every time, didn't know what to say, and didn't have much to say to me. I'm sure they got dozens of grandchildren and seen epic things, so who am I? But from my perspective, like Chris had said, it wasn't lost on me that I had an opportunity, and what I set out to do was try to get these kind of stories. I'm watching John Wayne movies growing up about World War II, and I'm going, I know as a fact that these guys are gone through some harrowing stuff, but their stories never told. And we're there helping to have their stories told deservedly. And that was huge. Having them on set, seeing them in person, like Stacey toured us around, tried to give us you know, a little more of a foothold on what who we were dealing with. And we'd go, and he was just older, distinguished gentleman, just like, oh, whatever, another, you know, young generation person coming to visit. And like somebody mentioned before, they don't care about their feats. They're just like, oh yeah, that's I guess that was me. Oh, it was a long time ago, and just watching.
Akira was funny. Akira didn't
Yeah,
even want to go
exactly.
meet the president. Yeah, they invited
Just
him to Pearl
amazing.
Harbor when Obama and Abe went, and he was like, "No, that's okay."
You know, and the
Yeah,
more I
that's
get involved with it, the more respect I have for these people. The more I don't want to stop, and the more I think that the story has to be expanded upon, or at least the telling of the story. So, yeah, I got to thank Stacey for that, and of course these great men that fought. I just, nobody really I can relate to in this part of the world, in this culture, that I can really look up to. This hasn't been presented to me in film or in the media, so I'm looking at real life, you know, events, and these guys clearly did some epic things that were never really covered by the media or celebrated or glorified. And to be a part of that, to be able to portray, you know, a great figure in history is huge as an actor. Huge, because it hasn't been done before. We're, you know, pioneers of breaking new ground here.
And you didn't know who Masaji Marumoto was either before.
Right,
you
I didn't. You know what I've learned from Stacey? It's incredible. She's brought so much to my mind, to my life. Honestly, it gives me a hell of a lot more direction, give me a lot more understanding perspective about what Hollywood is and how they perceive, you know, people that look like us. Yeah. It's just a never-ending process.
We need more of this history told. It's clear, and you know, I'll bring it back to Band of Brothers again. I'm as a tour guide here. Well, I grew up with heroes, movie heroes, sports heroes, but there's a generation of kids now who grew up where Dick Winters was their hero. That's amazing. And Alex Kershaw's series for The Liberator for Netflix, you know, Felix Sparks, the guy portrayed that. There'll be people watching that who will kind of almost tear down their movie star posters and put a poster of a real life World War II hero on their wall. And to me, that's amazing, isn't it? I mean, that because they are aspirational, these characters, that you can genuinely look at World War II vets and go, yeah, no, those guys and women, they are worth celebrating. Lots of people we celebrate in life are actually not that worth celebrating. We celebrate an ideal of them and not actually who they really are, you know. And you know, I'm still upset that John Voight, who made Midnight Cowboy, is now the guy he is now on Twitter. Because I'm like, no, John Voight, you made ground-breaking movies that highlighted things. What have you become? It's horrible to look at what he says now. I'm sorry to get political, but you know, World War II guys and girls, they absolutely, pure as they come, they deserve our respect. And anything that tells what they did is worth. So I think we've come full circle on this now. So Stacey, it's been a pleasure talking to you and Peter and Chris and Jake. And I will do whatever I can to try and push this film out there. People are already saying they're going to go download it and watch it. And you know, I'd love to see it in more classrooms. I'd like to see it in, and I'm glad I was on the jury of that film. That's how we got to meet, Stacey. You're quite correct. Yeah. I was on the jury of the 2018 Normandy World War II Film Festival, and I had to watch your film. And I have to tell you, Stacey, there were some great films to submit. There was documentaries. Some of them are really great, and some of them are really not very great. But I have to watch them. There's some is like, oh God, you know. I think I did 63 hours of viewing I had to do for that, and a few of the hours were quite painful. Yours was the pleasurable 2 hours, I have to say. But anyway, I think we've come full circle on this. I love how these conversations go. I think World War II filmmaking is a very important part of understanding history, because an access people have to a film is that they have with it that books don't do. You know, I mean, you'd be surprised how little print runs of books. You know, even some of these best-selling World War II authors, their print runs of books are only a few thousand. But films reach tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and in some cases millions. And whether we like it or not, that's how people learn their history. And more people like yourself, Stacey, who take the history seriously, should be involved in movies, not just people signing contracts on Hollywood desks as a vehicle for so-and-so star to shine in. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, folks. Just a reminder what we're coming up this week. Thursday, we have Catherine coming on talking about the women who with silver wings who are the transport carrier pilots of World War II in America. We got 2 Canadian shows. I said we've got Double Threat with Ellen Besner talking about the Canadian Jews in World War II. We've got Tim Cook talking about Canada's fight for history on Sunday. So lots more coming up on World War II TV, but I've really enjoyed this show. Don't forget, as usual, click subscribe, get the notifications, follow us on Patreon, follow Go For Broke on Twitter, follow everybody here, and you'll find out more about their projects. So Thank you guys for watching. Any final comments? Many of you want to say any last thing?
I'm gonna make it to the UK again, and next time I need that tour.
Well, sure. Whenever you want to come to Normandy, I'm happy to take you out there. I'd love to show you
I need
Normandy,
you
and
all take me to Omaha Beach, and that's it.
I would be honoured to take you to Omaha Beach. It would be, and the British sector, because British people were involved too. You know, yeah.
Perfect.
Some people forget that, but yeah, no, great showcase. So thanks, Stacey. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Peter. So it is Paul Woodad for World War II TV saying I'll see you all again very shortly. Thanks for watching. Take care.